Yeah, now. Yeah. Let me know. I'll shoot you a text or something, and we'll figure something out. Even though I'm speaking.
Hey, we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like you said, we were on again.
Yeah.
We like the outcome.
Great, man. It's like the sound guy. Oh yeah, they're
You gotta have an open mind.
Hurrah, we're going and we're so excited you're here. So thank you for joining us. We have coffee and we're super casual, so feel free to get up anytime to get coffee. The bathrooms are just down that hallway. Help yourself to that. There's also lots of cookies, so please eat them. Or my daughter will eat all of them. My name is Molly. I'm a part of the launch team here. So we're really excited you're here. If you have any questions after the service, you can find any of us in our awesome gray shirts, and we can answer those questions for you. So there are blue cards in your seat. If you didn't fill those out before you walked in, we would love for you to fill that out and just get some information. There's a space for prayer requests on there. And then you can drop those in the offering bucket, and we'll do that at the end of the service. So we also want to tell you about in 2 weeks, the third Sunday of every month, we're going to do third Sunday lunch. And so that will be the time where we can just kind of eat and have food. But it's also a great time for you to ask if you have questions and just kind of find out more about what's going on here at Table Community. So we'd love for you to join us for that. We'll be after the 11 o'clock or whatever service time we have at that time. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to jump into worship. Father, we just thank you for this morning. We thank you for beautiful weather, and thank you for everybody that's here today. Most of all, we just thank you for what this day means. God, we just thank you for your Son and his sacrifice and everything that means in our lives. We just pray that you would be lifted up in this worship, and just pray that you would be operated and speak, and pray that you would be the kids back there learning about you in their own way, and pray that you would just be glorified in the building this morning. Pray this all in Jesus' name.
You guys go ahead and stand with us as we worship. Just wanted to start off just thinking about this morning, it being Easter. Just this passage from Romans 8 came into my head. It says, "If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you." So we get to celebrate this morning because of the freedom that Christ gave us by dying in our place. And so let's sing. We have come to give you glory. We have come to give you praise. Sing that again. We have come to give you glory. Welcome in this place. Welcome in this place. You're welcome in this place. You're welcome in this place. You're welcome in this place. Sing, have your way. 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 We have come to give you glory. We have come to give you praise. Oh, you're welcome in this place. 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 Sing, bless the Lord. Sing, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and let all that's within me shout out. Shout out. Sing, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and let all that's within me shout out. the start before the beginning of time. No point of reference, spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born in the vapor of your breath. The planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. Creation sings your praises so loud. God of the promise, don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, nature and science follow the sound of your voice. As you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. Evolving in pursuit of what you said. The all reveals your nature so alive. I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, canvas of your grace. Creation still obeys you so alive. So alive. So alive. The stars were made to worship so high. The mountains bow in reverence so high. The oceans roar your praise so high. Oh, worth everything it takes to lift you high, so high. The wind goes where you send it so high. The rocks cry out in silence so high. The sum of all our praises still falls shine. And we'll sing again 100 billion God of salvation, chase out my heart through all of my failure and pride. I know you created light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. speak, 100 billion failures disappear. When you lost your life so I could find it. You left the grave behind you so long. I can see your heart and everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. You gladly chose surrender so alive. You cried a billion different ways. Every precious one, the child you died to save. You gave your life to love them so well. You would again 100 billion times. What measure could amount to your desire? The one who never leaves the one behind. Father, we thank you, God, that you never leave us behind. Father, that you always pursue us. God, you're always chasing after us with your love and your grace. And so today, God, we just pray that as we receive what you're going to say to us through your scripture, God, that we would just be open to what you have to say to us, God. And we become more like you today, in Jesus' name. You guys can be seated.
Amen. Hey, welcome to Table Community Church. If this is your first time here, we're glad you're here. You guys should know that, one, it's Easter. So happy Easter. But it's also launch day. And so we've been praying. There's a group of people here that have been praying for a very long time that you guys would come. And there are actually churches and people all over the country today that are praying for you. And so I am glad you are here with us today. And so it's Easter Sunday, and if you've ever been to church before on Easter Sunday, you've probably heard the story of Jesus. You've heard the story about how on Good Friday Jesus goes to the cross and he is crucified and he is buried, and on Saturday there's this time of mourning, and then on Sunday it is resurrection morning again. And so Jesus has come to life. This thing's hot, isn't it? Turn me down a little bit, Caleb. We weren't so hot last service. But, so we're glad you're here. But if you've been here on Easter, if you've been to church on Easter before, you probably know the story of Easter. You're probably at least familiar with it, that Jesus died on the cross and he rose again so that we could experience new life, so that we would find a new identity and purpose and meaning in life, and that we could follow Jesus into eternity because of Easter. And you probably know that story. You've probably seen that movie before. But it's not just any story. It is the greatest story of all. And so it is the story of all stories. It is the grand narrative that we can find ourselves within that story. And when we do, it brings meaning and significance and purpose to our lives. And our lives make sense of in light of who Jesus is and what he has done and what it means to follow him. And so we're beginning this new series today called A New Story, what it means to find a new story within the story of Jesus. And one of the things about stories is that all stories hold certain elements that make them stories. Have you ever sarcastically told somebody, hey, nice story? Right? Generally, when we say that to somebody, what we mean is that was not really a story, right? That what you were trying to tell me, it didn't go anywhere, right? And so there are certain elements in story that make a story progress, and so this is true in the story of Jesus as well. And so today we're going to look at one of those elements of stories, and one of the elements of story is called there's a scene in every movie and in most books that you'll read called the Save the Cat scene. Okay, and the Save the Cat scene, let me read you a definition of what that means. It is a decisive moment when the protagonist, that's the hero of the story, does something nice, like save a cat. Right? And so it is the scene where we first meet the hero in order to gain the audience favor and support for the main character right from the start. So it's that first scene in the movie, it's that first scene in the book where we meet the character and something happens and we know that we're supposed to root for that character. Right? How many of you have seen like Rocky Balboa, the first one, right? So in the beginning of the movie, you got big tough guy Rocky, and we find him and he's taking care of these turtles. Right? And so we know he's the good guy. Right? Rocky's the good guy. Or that cartoon Aladdin. We grew up watching Aladdin, and so Aladdin is a thief. They sing the song Street Rat, right? And the guards chase him through the city and because he has stolen some fruit, right? And they chase him all through the city, and finally he gets away, and he gives that fruit to a little boy and a little girl who are homeless, and we go, oh, like this is a good thief. Like this is the guy that I'm supposed to be rooting for. That's the save the cat moment. There's actually another plot device called Kick the Dog, and it's the opposite thing. It's at the beginning, and it lets us know that this guy's a bad guy, right? Think of Harry Potter and Voldemort, right? At the very beginning of those books, Voldemort does a lot of things that we don't like so that we won't cheer for him, okay? That is that moment. And this is true of the Jesus story. This is true of the Easter story. That if God sent Jesus to die on the cross and to be raised back to life, but if there's not a moment in Jesus' life that makes him worth following, then that stuff, it just won't matter to us. Right? We might look at that, we might even say that is from God. Right? We might even say that that's a nice trick, God, that was a cool thing you did, that was a nice show of power. But if Jesus is not a person worth following into eternity, that stuff will not hold significance for us as well. And so, if Jesus is the Messiah, but Jesus is a jerk, we will not care about the death and resurrection. Okay? And so we're going to look at this story of Jesus, and we're going to look at a save the cat moment with Jesus. And so there are different elements of story that are true for all story. There's the save the cat moment we'll look at today. There is the exciting incident. It's kind of the point in the movie where this is a point of no return. You can't turn back from that. There's a conflict in the middle of the movie, and in the story, if there's not conflict, you don't have a story because there's nothing to overcome, right? And so there's a resolution at the end of the story. And I'm the worst person to go to the movies with, right? You can ask my wife. I'll be like, Molly, this is save the cat moment that's happening right here. If we don't have this scene, then we won't care about the rest of the movie. She's like, shut up. We're trying to watch the movie. Molly, this is the inciting incident. This is the point of no return. Right? If he doesn't take this step, if we don't have a movie, be quiet. Right? This character is introduced into the movie, and because this character is introduced into the movie, well, this movie's actually going to end this way. Like, this person was introduced to make the story go this direction, so I can tell you how the movie's going to end right now. She's like, be quiet. Right? And so they say, Leo Tolstoy said there's only two real stories. He said there are two stories. One is a man goes on a journey, or a stranger comes to town. Okay? And so Christopher Booker, he's kind of this screenwriter guru. He wrote a book called 7 Basic Plots. He says there's only 7 stories that we tell ourselves, and they all fit into these categories. Overcoming the monster, rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, comedy, tragedy, and rebirth. Right? And the point of this is that we all tell ourselves stories to make sense of the world. It's how we make sense of the world. We are storytelling creatures. Right? We tell ourselves stories. That's how we make sense of things. Our life doesn't actually happen like a story structure. In a story there are certain elements that we have to walk through to get toward a resolution. But in our life, typically we ask ourselves, how did I get here? And it was something over here, and something over there, and something over here, and something over here. They just kind of all coalesce to the point that we're at today. But we make those and we weave those into a narrative so that we can make sense of our lives. And so Jesus comes, and God gives us Jesus, the person of God himself, in the person of Jesus. And we find this story of Jesus to be a story that we can find ourselves within. That this is the ultimate, the grand narrative that makes sense of life. And so today we're actually going to look in John chapter 11. You can turn there in your Bibles if you have those with you. And if you don't, you can look on the screen and follow along with me. And so today we're going to look at a save the cat moment for Jesus. That the cross and the resurrection matter, but they don't matter unless we have a Jesus that's worth following. So we're going to look at this resurrection story of Lazarus today. And we're going to start in verse 17. Okay, and I'm going to catch you up because it's kind of a long passage, so I'm going to catch you up and we're going to jump into the middle of the story. So there are three people you need to know in this story besides Jesus. There is Martha, there is Mary, and there is Lazarus. And they are all siblings. Okay, there's two older sisters and one younger brother. And these are Jesus' best friends. Okay, Jesus has his disciples that go with him everywhere, but these are his best friends that every time he travels through their town, he doesn't travel without stopping and talking to them. These are like the best friends that are like first cousins, okay? Right? He sees them every time. He cares for these people. He loves these people very much. And so Lazarus is sick. And so Mary and Martha send a messenger to Jesus. And they tell Jesus, Lazarus is sick. Jesus, you're not only our friend, but we've seen you do some miracles, and we'd love for you to come over here and heal Lazarus as well. Okay, and so they go, this messenger goes to Jesus, and they tell him this, and Jesus says, sends the messenger back and says, we'll come in a little while. His disciples kind of have this argument with him. They say, Jesus, last time we went to Bethany, they tried to stone us. And so we don't want to be a part of that anymore. And so Jesus is like, yeah, we'll just wait. And so a few days later, they send a messenger back. And the messenger tells Jesus that Lazarus is dead. Okay? And then there's this really odd little interchange between Jesus and his disciples where Jesus tells his disciples that Lazarus has fallen asleep. And his disciples are like, oh, good, all right, he'll wake up. Right? And Jesus is like, oh, by sleep, I mean, he was dead. And so that happens, and they're just like, why didn't you say so? Right? And so there's this mystery here that is surrounding what has happened. If Jesus is truly friends with Lazarus, and if Jesus is truly a healer, and he could have stopped this, why did Jesus not go and take care of his friends? So we're going to start in verse 17. It says, when Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in the grave for 4 days. Okay, and this is important to know. He's been in the grave for 4 days, okay? And so remember, this is in first century Judaism. This is like nearly 2,000 years ago that this story has been written for us. And so not only is it a different culture, but it's a completely different time in history. And so there are some beliefs that are here that we don't hold in our culture, but they were true in this culture. And so they believed that the soul stayed with the body for up to 3 days. Okay? And so after 3 days, the soul would leave the body, and they believed that up until that point, there was hope of healing and there was hope of resurrection. Okay? And so when they said that Lazarus has been in the grave for 4 days, they're saying, there's no hope. Okay? And so this is where Jesus finds himself. And so verse 18, it says, Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary for their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. So you have Martha. Martha is the older sister, okay? She's a very typical older sister. She has it together. She takes care of stuff. She takes care of the house. She makes sure Mary and Lazarus are doing what they're supposed to be doing, okay? And then Mary is the middle child, and she is very much the middle child, okay? So she's got an older sister and a younger brother, and so they get all the attention. So when she gets the attention, she really likes the attention. But at the same time, she's kind of independent. I can do my own thing. Like, I don't really care what people think that much. Okay, and so verse 21, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Right? Martha's a good kid. She believes. She trusts. This is who she is. Verse 23, Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." "Yes," Martha said, "he will rise again when everyone else rises at the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never ever die. Do you believe this, Martha?" So Jesus is saying something. He says, "Martha, I am the resurrection and the life." Verse 27, it said, "Yes, Lord," she says. "I have always believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." So Jesus asked her, Lazarus has died. Jesus, if he would have shown up, then Lazarus would be alive. And so Jesus asked her, he says, "Martha, do you believe that your brother will rise again?" And she says, "Yes, Lord, of course I believe in the resurrection, that one day I will see my brother again." And so there's this belief, and when she says the resurrection, she's talking about heaven and heaven coming to earth. And there's this belief that in the last day that God is going to make all things right and make all things new again. And in that time, the people that we have lost will be reconnected with and will be together with again. And so when Jesus asked her, he says, "Do you believe that your brother will rise again?" She says, "Yes, Jesus, I believe in the resurrection." And this is the Easter story that most of us have been taught. Is that if we believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and that he rose again and that he can save our life, then one day there will be heaven where all things will be made right again. And so she says, "Jesus, I believe that. I believe that one day, things are going to get better." But Jesus, what you don't understand is it's been 4 days. You didn't make it this time. Right? You weren't there for me this time. Jesus, I believe in a one day God who is going to make things right. But right now, I'm in a whole lot of pain, and you were just too late. You didn't show up for this. And this is what Christians, we do this a lot of times when someone passes away, and I don't know how comforting it is when somebody close to us dies, we say, well, one day we're going to see them in heaven again, right? And so my grandmother passed away in January, and I would be lying if I said that didn't bring me some comfort to know that one day in heaven I'm going to see Mama again. But she lived a very long life, and she had a large, wonderful family, and her and my grandfather, they were in ministry, and they did all kinds of wonderful things, and they lived this beautiful life, and they left a legacy behind them, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that to see Mama again one day brings me some comfort. But Lazarus is young, and there is a certain kind of pain that comes when somebody dies before their time, we would say. And so there's a different kind of pain that is happening right here. And so this one day, God, this one day in heaven, she says, yes, I believe in that, but right now my pain is real. And right now, the end result of where we're going, it doesn't really have any effect on my pain that is happening right now. But Jesus is saying something different to Martha. She said, I believe in one day, but he's saying this, he said, I am the resurrection and the life. Martha, I'm glad you believe in a one day heaven will get there, but you have to understand, I am the resurrection and the life. The resurrection and the life is a person who is standing right here in front of you right now. Martha, you don't have to wait. I am here with you. Verse 28 says, Then Martha returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, The teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. And so Mary goes out to Jesus, the middle sibling, the younger sister. She goes out to Jesus And she's asking Jesus the same question that Martha's asking in her own way. She's saying, Jesus, if you had been there, this wouldn't have happened. Jesus, why didn't you show up for this? God, why did you let this happen? We ask ourselves these questions all the time. Jesus doesn't really give her this great answer. Her question just kind of lingers there. She doesn't know what to do with it. She says, God, why did you let this happen? And we would ask, God, why did I get fired? Why did you let that happen? Why did this person in my life who meant so much to me, why did they have to die? And God, why did you let that person cheat on me? And why did you let that person in my life who left me, who abandoned me, who should have been there for me? God, why do I have this depression in my life that I have to deal with all the time? God, why can't I get better? And those questions just stay there. Verse 33, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping and saw other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked them. They told him, Lord, come and see. Read verse 35 with me. It says, then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. But some said, the man healed a blind man. Couldn't he also have kept Lazarus from dying? Right? And so some people looked at what Jesus was doing and they said, oh, look at the sympathy Jesus had. And some people said, yeah, but he was a healer. Why couldn't he just have shown up? But what I want you to see here is the range of emotion that we see with Jesus. It said that he was deeply angered, and then it said that he wept, that he cried, that he wailed. And this is what I want you to understand, that this is not necessarily the God that a lot of us have come to understand. The God we find on the cross is not a God who is distant. It's not a God who is far out there. It's not a God who is disengaged and wants no part of this messy situation that we're in. Now, this is a God who sees it all. He sees Mary and Martha, and He is there with them. He feels the pain that they feel, that this is a God who has a deep investment in what is going on, that there is this is a God who is in it. And so you have to ask yourself, you say He was deeply angered. Well, why would Jesus be deeply angered? This is just kind of the way life goes, right? But Jesus, I think Jesus sees us, that we find God in the person of Jesus. And God never created the world to be a place to experience sin and death and to have all of the pain that we have in our life. And He sees His friend Lazarus, and His friend Lazarus has experienced death. And so that makes Him mad. And then it says that He says, Mary, where is the tomb? Where have y'all buried Him? And so Mary takes Him to the tomb, and the tomb would have been like the tomb of Jesus. There would have been a hill, and there would have been a big hole carved out in the hill, and there would have been a stone rolled in front of it, and they would have probably buried several family members in there. And so there they are in the tomb, and Jesus says to Mary, He says, take me to that place. And it says Jesus wept there. Right? And we know how this story ends, right? Lazarus comes back to life. He comes back to life, and so we have to ask ourselves, okay, like we know Jesus is going to heal Lazarus. We know Jesus is going to resurrect him and bring him out of that grave. So why is Jesus bothering to stop and cry? Why would He waste His time doing that? Because what we see in the person of Jesus is we see a God who doesn't say, hey, one day you're going to get to heaven, and one day things are going to be okay, and I'm going to fix everything down there. So what you got to do is you got to suck it up and you got to move on. And if you can just drudge your way through this life, then one day things are going to be okay. Jesus doesn't say that. He says to Martha and Mary, He says, take me to that place where He is buried. Take me to that pain that you are in right now, and let's find some healing together. The Bible says He weeps with those who weep, and He mourns with those who mourn. And so Jesus doesn't necessarily, the point is just because things are going to be fixed one day, that somehow is going to erase the pain that you feel today, that you feel right now. You see, this is the save the cat moment for Jesus. Right? If Jesus isn't this kind of Jesus, if He's not a Jesus who's in the midst of our pain and our suffering and our grief and all the things that disappoint us and the sins that hold us down, if He doesn't meet us in that place, well, that's not the Jesus. The death and the resurrection, those things don't have the same kind of meaning. That's the Jesus that I'm willing to follow through a death and a resurrection to experience eternity. And so, you got to ask yourself, do I have that pain in my life right now? Mary and Martha, they think it's over. They think it's done. Jesus, I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the someday, one day, Easter, heaven, Jesus, but right now you didn't make it. But Jesus has come in the midst of our pain right now. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The resurrection, Martha, is a person who is standing right in front of you. The life is a person who is here in the midst of us. Martha, you don't have to wait for someday. I'm going to meet you right here in the midst of it. He looks at Mary and he says, take me to that place. Take me to that place of death and pain and suffering. I want to ask you to consider doing a few things today. One, if that's you, if you didn't fill out a blue card earlier, I want you to fill out one of these blue cards. And if you're looking for a church, I want you to consider this being your church home. That this is a place where there's a group of people that have come together and centered their lives on the person of Jesus. And we walk together, and when there are trials and hardships in our lives, and when there are things that we get tied up in that we shouldn't get tied up in, that we are here together and we are walking together to know Jesus and to become like Jesus. So I invite you to fill out this blue card. There's some options on here. One, I would say is join a group. Okay? And so we have groups that meet on Tuesday night and one that meet on Wednesday night. Here, and I would say be a part of that. That stuff is actually, we turn our chairs and we open our lives up to each other and we talk about what Jesus is doing in our lives. And I would tell you that it's more important than what we do right here on Sunday morning. That stuff really matters. And some of you might be here today and you're going, okay, I don't need, I've been putting off because there's a one day Jesus and I think, heaven, that sounds like a nice place, but I need Jesus right now. And if that's you, I would say circle the little sentence right there that says become a Christian. I want to know who Jesus is. I want to be a part of this. And so the story doesn't end right there. If you look at verse 38, it says Jesus was still angry when he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told him. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell's going to be terrible. Right? And she's like, Jesus, don't do this. It's too late. Okay? Verse 40, Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it loud for the sake of these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. Then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, read this last part with me, unwrap him and let him go. Some of us came here today with some grave clothes on. We came with some hurts and some pains and some things that we've gotten ourselves into that we shouldn't have gotten ourselves into, and we're being bound up by that kind of stuff. And Jesus is saying, you don't have to live that way. There's a one day heaven, yes, and I'm glad you believe in that, but right now, here in front of you is the person of Jesus. He is in the room with us. He is the resurrection and the life. And you don't have to allow your past pain or your current pain to keep you from the healing that Jesus has for you right now. That your story, that you have a backstory, and Jesus says, that's a cat worth saving. Right? That is a story worth redeeming. And so he says, I want you to experience that today. And so do you believe that there's a Jesus that is here with you in the midst of your pain? I want to read this poem to end the message today. This is a poem my brother wrote, and it's always tough for me to read this poem because I know the story behind this poem. this is a story. This is a poem written from the perspective of Lazarus, and so it's called "Lazarus Dies Again." And it's written. Lazarus is talking to death because Lazarus has died and he has risen again and he has met the resurrection and the life in Jesus, and so he is coming to death a second time. Okay, he's approaching death a second time. So my brother wrote this poem whenever he and his wife they gave birth to a stillborn child, and so like Lazarus, they lost somebody that was much before their time. And so this is a story of Lazarus, and I want you to hear this. I want you to read Lazarus as he greets death a second time. It says, "O death, I already know you. That time before you wrapped around me like a wet towel and whispered deep in my ear that deep in the ground I was yours. And I was. 4 days you laid claim on me, staked as I was to the earth, now salted and barren by tears of even God himself. 4 days I lay property of Hades, but this time around I have no fear. I heard the word to come forth, and no matter how tight you squeezed, the breath came back to me. And every breath I breathed, I knew your power and your sting are all bluster and show. So hug me close, you old frog, because I know your arms are broken." And you got to think about Lazarus. What was Lazarus' life after being raised from the dead, after meeting the resurrection and the life in the person of Jesus, after seeing him there? What did that do for Lazarus' life? Can you imagine the shift in perspective for Lazarus? I mean, just imagine if Lazarus was in the room with us here today, and you said, "Lazarus, I've been having a tough time, man. Do you want to, let's go hit up that Pizza Inn buffet after we get out of here, and let's sit down and let's talk about life." And so you go and you sit down with Lazarus, and you say, "Lazarus, I lost my job last week." And Lazarus goes, "I hear you, buddy. I was dead for 4 days last week." It changed. Can you imagine the shift in Lazarus' mind, having known the person of Jesus, knowing that no matter what I go through, no matter how dark the place, no matter how much hope seems to have been lost, that Jesus can meet me there in that. And Lazarus knows, he says, I can follow Jesus into eternity because I've met the resurrection and the life right here and now, and he's right here with us. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for Easter. Thank you for the resurrection. Thank you for the life. Thank you that Jesus isn't just a God that we can put off and one day he'll make things right, but that he walks with us right here in the midst of it. That we're never too far gone. That he can meet us there. That he says to Mary, "Take me to that place. Show me where you hurt. Show me where things are dark and ugly. And let me walk with you toward you." God, you're a God worth following. Not only into eternity, but in this life right now. We just love you. We thank you for your Son, Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
I just want to invite you guys to stand up. And as we continue this time of worship, just a response and what has been spoken to us, I just ask that you just respond however you feel led. So as we just sing this, just focus and just think about, and let it really just hit your heart what was just spoken to us. 'Cause you stood outside my grave with tears still on your face, and I heard you say my name. My night was turned again, 'cause you came, and I knew that you would come, and you saved, see your face. I am alive, 'cause you came, and I knew that you would come. So you said there's only sleep. With one word my heart was beating, and I rose up from my grave, and my fear was Thursday, 'cause you came, and I knew that you would come, and you said, and my heart it woke up. No, I'm not afraid to see your face. I am alive, 'cause you came. Oh, I knew that you would come, 'cause you came. And I knew that you would come, and you said, and my heart it woke up. No, I'm not afraid to see your face. I am alive, 'cause you came, and I knew that you would come. Sing this with me. 'Cause you are a miracle working God. You are a miracle working God. You are a miracle working God. 'Cause you are a miracle working God. You are a miracle working God. You are a miracle working God. Come on, sing it. 'Cause you are a miracle working God. I know that you are a miracle working God. I know that you are a miracle working God. 'Cause you are a miracle working God. 'Cause you are a miracle working God. I know that you are a miracle working God. A miracle working God. 'Cause you came, and I knew that you would come. And you sang, oh, you sang, and my heart it woke up. No, I'm not afraid to see your face. I am alive, 'cause you came, and I knew that you would come. 'Cause you came, and I knew that you would come. And you sang, and my heart it woke up. No, I'm not afraid to see your face. I am alive, 'cause you came. Oh, I knew you would come. Together, I cast my mind. And I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bowed and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah stood, and all alone. Sing oh praise. Sing oh praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, our God. Come sing, then on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. In old tremble dead, where is your sleep? The angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, our God. Oh, praise Him, oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, our God. He shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints. My gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Go one more time, all together. Oh, praise. Sing, oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, our God. Oh Lord, our God. Oh Lord, our God.
God, we just thank you this morning. God, we just thank you for what you've done, and as we continue this time of worship with giving, God, we just give out an abundance of joy and love for what you've done for us. God, that we would just give back what belongs to you. We love you, God. Amen. Stars lit, the morning sun is down, the Savior of the world was born. His body on the cross, His blood poured out for us, the weight of every curse upon Him. Heaven looked to me, The Son of God was laid in darkness. A battle in the grave. The war on death was waged. The power of hell forever broken. The ground began to shake. The storm was rolled away. His perfect love cannot be overcome. Now death is your sting. Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Forever He is glorified. Forever He is lifted high. Forever He is risen. He is alive. He is alive. The ground began to shake. The storm was rolled away. His perfect love cannot be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? 'Cause our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Forever He is glorified. Forever He is lifted high. Forever He is risen. He is alive. He is alive. He is alive. He is alive. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah, the Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah, we sing hallelujah, the Lamb is overcome. Forever He is glorified. Forever He is lifted high. Forever He is risen. He is alive. Yes, He is alive. The tomb is empty, 'cause the tomb is empty. You won't find Him there. You won't find Him there, 'cause the tomb is empty. The tomb is empty. You won't find Him there. You won't find Him there. Sing with me. 'Cause the tomb is empty. 'Cause the tomb is empty. You won't find Him there. You won't find Him there. The tomb is empty, 'cause the tomb is empty, you won't find him there. You won't find him there. You won't find him there. 'Cause he's here with us. Every step we take, every move we make, he's with us. Ooh. 'Cause he is alive. He is alive. God, we just thank you that you woke us up this morning to come and just worship you. To come and do what we were created to do. To worship you. God, to give back to you the praise from our lips. God, we just thank you for the cross, and we thank you for the resurrection. We thank you for your Son. We thank you that we don't have to wear our old grave clothes anymore. And we love you, God. Amen.
Amen. Hey, thank you guys for coming again today to Launch Sunday. We're so glad you're here. Hang out for a little bit afterwards. Have some coffee. Please eat some of those cookies. And just spend a little time with us. Get to know us. If you haven't shaken everybody's hand who's wearing one of these shirts right now, take time to do that. If you didn't get your gift, if you're a first-time guest and you didn't get your gift outside, there's probably still some out there, but there's also coffee cups right over here. You can grab one of those. We want to encourage you to do that and invite you to be part of. Invite you to be part of groups. We have a group that meets on Tuesday night in Duncan, and a group that meets right here on Wednesday nights. And so there's some cards over there with that contact information if you want to do that. And then on the third Sunday of the month, so that's 2 weeks from today, we will do what we're calling Third Sunday lunches. And it's exactly what you imagine. It's lunch on third Sunday. And it's an opportunity for you to just spend some more time getting to know people and ask any questions that you might have about Table Community, because this is your first time. You've probably got questions. And so we'll be happy to answer those for you. Guys, again, thank you so much for coming, and Table Community, you're sent.